Today's conversation, we are discussing The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. We're enjoying this walk. It may start raining. If it does, we'll continue the conversation in the car. 3 points that I would like to explore with you. There's so much to this book that has been helpful for me. I have been revisiting it regularly, and now I get to revisit with you again today. 3 points I would like to discuss is number 1, your mind as an instrument. Number 2, accept, then act. And number 3, wherever you are, be there totally. Let's actually start with number 3. Wherever you are, there you are. By be there totally, it means be present. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. Be deeply engaged with what you are doing. Deeply present. This has been very helpful for me in life. As mentioned, we are revisiting the books that have been very helpful for me in 3 areas of life. Number 1, my entrepreneurial journey. Number 2, communication. And number 3, harmonious relationships. Harmonious relationships. In these 3 areas, we may be presented with many opportunities to be fully present. For example, during conversations, the person may think about what to say to the person to get a particular outcome. What is being proposed here is to try not thinking that. Be as you are. This allows authenticity and spontaneity to arise. Infinite intelligence is also in between the space, the silence between the words, between the thinking. We access this infinite intelligence, clarity, by being present, not unnecessarily thinking. So wherever you are, be there totally. He says, if you find your here and now intolerable and it makes you unhappy, you have 3 options. Remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it totally. One way is not better than the other. I have found myself performing each of these as applicable. Which one is ideal for you? That's a great question. The one that is ideal for you is revealed in the silence, in the stillness. I trust you've noticed this. Clarity arises in moments of silence, by being still. This can be done during conversations as well, I found. There have been times where it appeared there was a need to argue with the person, generate an experience of unnecessary conflict, because I was identified with an illusion of separation. Illusion of separation-based thinking, as we discussed in Sunday's video. I'll link in the description. I'll also link in the description to the playlist of the various books that I have been discussing since we started this series, which includes The Compound Effect and also the wonderful book Atomic Habits by James Clear. So clarity arises in the stillness. You know what to do, whether it would be remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it totally. Similar to how I say, with experiences in life, I could either change how I relate to it, accept it the way it is, or do something different. Which is related to point number 2, accept, then act. He says, always work with it, not against it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. This will miraculously transform your whole life. So the way I relate to this is, at any moment, if I appear to be identified with an illusory thought of separation between myself and another person, I know that that is not really thinking. I am really thinking when I think from the premise of being, love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, my true nature, in harmonious relationship with the other person. So if I was about to get identified with one of these illusory thoughts, I simply accept myself the way I am. I don't try to fight the thought. I don't try to forcefully replace it with another one. I allow my emotions to be released. I don't try to suppress them or think that they're bad or I have a problem if I experience emotions. What I do is I remain as I am. Be as you are. As right now, you exist. And the fact that you exist means you are whole, you are complete, and need nothing. You don't need approval, validation, or confirmation of the fact that you exist now. That you have always existed now. And as you don't identify with the labels of separation, the thoughts of separation, you realize your true nature. And then you can act with purpose. So what happens in conversations is the conversations flow. They naturally flow. A practical example would be, let's say we're working on a project. And there are a number of members on the team working on this project. And there are different timelines set up, different deliverables, action items, task lists that are part of completing this project, which is, let's say, due on a specific date. If one of the participants did not complete the task list item on time, back in the days, it was identification to illusions of separation illusions of separation-based beliefs that would generate thoughts in mind of conflict, maybe finger pointing, rather than assuming full responsibility. Assuming full responsibility doesn't mean that you have to forcefully try to figure out the solution. What I find is that the solution naturally arises. It naturally arises by accepting and then acting. So accepting, to me, is related to point number 3. Wherever you are, be totally there. As he said, if you find your here and now intolerable and it makes you unhappy, you have 3 options. Remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it. In those moments, we may reassign the task. We may bring on additional team members. We may reallocate resources. We may change our timelines. Inevitably, we end up achieving the success of the project. So let's talk about accepting it. In that moment, one of the individuals did not appear to complete the task. Rather than identifying with thoughts of illusions of separation, generating unnecessary conflict, argumentation, what I noticed by accepting, which is the simple act of acknowledging that I am here now. Be totally here. Don't identify with the thoughts of separation. Allow the emotions to be released. What I have found universally is the next step arises. Clarity arises, which reveals how I can change my relationship to the experience. I might say, you know what? This person, 99.9% of the time, is completing these tasks. And rather than jump to conclusions, generating unnecessary conflict, resentment, how about if I have a conversation with this person? Because what I am truly interested in, and I trust you are as well, is harmonious relationships. So if they genuinely desire to move forward with the initiative, then we could work out a way that is mutually harmonious. If they encountered a challenge, which we could say generated the appearance of them not completing the task, that's okay. No shame, no condemnation. We can have a conversation about it. They can learn from the experience. During my 10 years in corporate and building my IT business and my consulting practice, actually every area of my life, there were times where I had wonderful leaders that would do this with me. I remember one time in corporate, I was in charge of backing up the phone system and all the voicemails on the phone system. The technology might have changed since then. Back then, we would manually run these backups on the phone system with these cartridges, backup cartridges. And so what ended up happening one time was I accidentally hit the restore button, and it restored the voicemail from 2 or 3 weeks earlier or something like that. Overriding the data. And my manager at the time, when I told him that, I went to his office and I said, whoops, I accidentally did that. He was very calm. He demonstrated this. He was present to the moment because he realized that, well, what can you do now other than the ideal thing to be done? He said to me, that's fine. Do we have a backup? The backup just ran. Do we have a backup? And I said, yes. Restore the backup. So I restored the backup. It's an obvious solution. Yet, I was thinking in terms of, oh no, I might get fired for this. How could I do something like this? Because I really did want to ensure that I was trustworthy. And so then he had a conversation with me about situations that are similar to this that he had went through, where he had also experienced wonderful leadership that was supportive. Because things like this can happen. And things like this have happened in times, let's say, where we didn't have a backup. Yet it was from that experience that we knew the ideal frequency to run the backups in. So even though in that moment I knew that there was a backup, you could say, why didn't you logically think there was a backup? At that time, this was over 20 years ago, I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking I was going to get fired. I was thinking I was going to lose my job. Let's actually set up under this tree here and continue our conversation as it started raining a bit. And so at any moment, we have the opportunity to practice this. Again, the 3 areas. Number 1, your mind is an instrument, a valuable instrument. You can use your mind to come up with creative solutions for challenges. It is easier to find the opportunity when we accept what is, rather than trying to force or control the outcome. Be still, clarity arises, and then act. At times, such as my example, if we're identified with a particular thought, which we could say via that thought, we seem to blame ourselves, or we could say cloud our mind with mental chatter, we might not see the easy, obvious step, but that's okay. You get better at applying this with practice. What's the practice? Number 3, wherever you are, be there totally. Be here now. Be as you are now. Accept yourself unconditionally. And as you continue to practice this, as I have found over the years as well, it is easier, far easier, to apply what my manager did at that time. He didn't learn it through reading this book, yet this book articulates it perfectly. He learned it through his teachers and through practice again and again and again, which is one of the reasons why he would move up quite rapidly in corporate, is because time and time again he would demonstrate sound leadership. So not only do we have the opportunity to practice this so that clarity arises, the still small voice is apparent, which is distinct from the mental chatter, we may even find that things tend to resolve themselves. I've seen this happen many times. Sometimes I might not logically come up with a solution, which is totally fine. Yet things seem to change on their own, as mentioned earlier. The infinite intelligence is in the space, in the silence, in between the words, in between the steps that we take. And then what happens is perhaps a person says, here's the solution, or something changes in the environment. I've seen that happen as well. We can say that's the magic of now. And as we continue to practice this, we also find as leaders, we're able to cultivate leadership with our team members, our friends, our relationships. So in entrepreneurship, for example, sound leadership doesn't just necessarily apply to your team members. It applies to your vendors, your mastermind group, your business partners. By taking full responsibility, by being present to the experience, accepting and then acting. So again, I accept what happens. That doesn't mean I want the appearance to remain the same. I accept fully that it is happening without throwing unnecessary thinking into the equation, which is not helpful. Because as mentioned, the mind is a valuable instrument. We use it when appropriate, and at times we put it aside. We allow clarity to arise. A harmonious relationship between using the mind intentionally and not using it to allow infinite intelligence to take care of everything for you. Actually, even when you're thinking, as mentioned, when you're thinking from your true nature, when you're thinking from the source, you'll find that those thoughts are clear thoughts. And those clear thoughts are thoughts of solutions to the seeming challenges or to the seeming problems. So even if you are thinking, you are really thinking, as we've been discussing, really thinking for yourself. Now, the practice of doing this again and again, and you may be presented with opportunities everywhere. For example, we were presented with an opportunity while we were walking here. All of a sudden, it started raining. It's still raining. Yet I trust that we're going to continue this conversation and it's going to flow. You trust that we're going to continue this conversation and it's going to flow and it's going to be in mutual harmony, mutual benefit. And this tree appeared, providing the shelter so that I could record with this camera and not be wet by the rain and not have the rain fall on the camera, microphone, etc. So we can stand here and talk for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it'll be totally fine. We are supported to talk here. In a moment when I sensed that there was some rain, immediately I applied this. Wherever I am there totally. I accept that it's raining. And then I look up and there's a tree and I said, let's go there. Let's set it up there. Practice doing this again and again so you can do this in your relationships during conversation, such as the example given. You could do this in situations where it calls for sound leadership. Actually, we can say that's a mark of a true leader, one that can accept, not try to fight it, not try to argue, not try to point fingers. It's unnecessary. Allow the still small voice and intuition to provide the clarity and then act. Or we could say no act. The answer is it depends. It could be, as he said here, removing ourselves from the situation, and again, it could be temporary, changing it temporary, and accepting it totally. For example, accepting it temporarily. Let's go back to that project example. If the project is not completed on time, or more specifically, if a task is not completed at time, that's totally fine. We can move the timeline. We can move things around, allocate resources accordingly to achieve the particular timeline. One way is not better than the other. You get, via intuition, the still small voice. So maybe you might remove yourself from the situation if, let's say, a person gets triggered by this other person not performing the task. They can be still, maybe go for a walk, and then the clarity arises. They know what to do or not do. And then by removing themselves from that situation for a moment and going for a walk, breathing deeply, whatever works for you, they go back to the conversation with that person and they're able to work it out to a mutually beneficial outcome. They may change it. They may say, you know what? Let's move this person from this particular task over to another task on the project, or they no longer need to complete that particular task. We will bring someone else to complete that task. Totally fine. Everything moves through. The moment that the person sees something not going to plan the way they think it should be, that is the moment to accept it, as we brought up in point number 2, accept it, that we could say things don't appear to go on plan. It doesn't mean that the project won't complete. Sometimes I found this was the case as well. We start with the project. We plan on moving forward with that project, and then all of a sudden some things change, and then we may notice that we're trying to now force and make it work, when actually the best thing to do is now pivot the team and the resources in a different direction. And we customize that project, or we move forward with that project at a later date. When we customize that project, it works out harmoniously. So we could say what we thought we were going to do actually ends up changing to our benefit by allowing space for that change to appear. Or as mentioned, what I have seen, another scenario is that we say, let's put this on hold for now. And then we find an appropriate time for it, maybe a few months later, a year later, where we move forward with that project and it performs harmoniously. Everything moves smoothly and the project is completed and it contributes to the business growth. And we weren't relying on that project for the business success, because when we put that project aside for now, clarity arose and some opportunities arose, which we moved forward with those opportunities, and the business revenue numbers were hit. So we see the benefit, in grand summary, of being here now, being present. It's a simple act, yet it could be challenging if a person has been identified with thinking patterns, inharmonious thinking patterns, in relation to the past, in relation to the present, in relation to the future, in relation to people, environment, circumstance, information, and no shame and condemnation. We applied the practice again, again, and again. And this practice becomes easier and easier and easier. Then the mind is used as an instrument. The individual is then not unnecessarily identified with untrue thinking patterns. It is easier for them to accept what appears, and then allow clarity to arise, and then know what to do next or not do next. It is easier for the person to be totally there. Wherever you are, there you are ideally, because you are perfect now. A person may think they're not perfect because of this or that reason, illusory. You are perfect now. Be as you are totally here. And that which appears as intolerable, the emotions are transmuted. The individual thinks righteously, thinks clearly, and they know what to do in relation to the situation. Whether it is to remove themselves from the situation temporarily or permanently, change it in some shape or form. For in business, for example, optimization, automation, delegation, elimination in part or in whole or in combination, clarity arises, or a person may show up or some information may show up that points to that clarity. Or they may accept it totally the way it is. That might be the totally appropriate thing to do at that time. And then things change in your favor. So perfect timing again, it just stopped raining. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I accept where I am now as everywhere I appear, there I am. Ideally now. As I accept myself and accept what appears, I acknowledge the harmonious relationship of inner and outer as one. I acknowledge all is in harmony and in contribution to my vision. This appears more so with increasing frequency on a continuous basis as far as the senses perceive, as I remain as I am now.